Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about impact. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, does the amount of impact that you have depend on your title as a software engineer? To a point, but mostly no. So there is something that I like to say, which is that if you want to get good at something, you have to have to make it your job. And there's another thing that is a bit of a mutation of that saying, which is, in my opinion, at the very least, that some responsibilities and roles and decisions you're only able to make those decisions if it is your job to make those decisions. Something that I think that I've actually had a talk with my manager the other day about, well, a while back, about this thing where I was saying to him that I feel like in my current role I sort of just do the same thing that I've been doing for years now, and leading teams or supporting teams or setting up work frameworks or doing coding and like making sure that all the things are happening and so forth. It's something that is a little bit old hat to me, and so I said, but I would like to be more involved because I have knowledge in, say, DevOps related work and SRE type of work, but it's not something that I've ever done as a full-time job, so I would really like to look at that. And then he goes, well, you can of course just, if you want to take some time and just like study about that or learn about that, absolutely go for that. And I say, well, no, that's not going to work, because unless it is my job, I will not face the sort of challenges that I am that I'm looking for to learn from, because I don't have any, like, it's just learning that I might as well just sit in my spare time and take courses. Courses is only going to get you so far, as probably a few of the people who watches this channel knows about. At some time you're going to have to be put in a situation where it's like it's like being in training to be a martial artist or a soldier or something like that. Sooner or later you have to go into combat in a life and death situation or like a confrontation or something like that, to test your skills, to learn by doing, right? And so he didn't really fully, like, he might have not wanted to sort of admit that, but it's the same thing when you, for example, want to make certain decisions on how you work within a company. So an example would be, ask yourself, why do you listen to your boss? Is it because they have some proven track record of being a very good decision maker or like an engineer or something like that? Most likely not. The reason why you're listening to them is because it's their job. You know that they are higher in the hierarchy than you are. That's actually all the entire reason as to why. It's something I love to talk to people about. That think about that a little bit, just in general in life. How many people do you take orders from or sort of allow to make fairly important decisions on your behalf, or basically set the rules for you, where you actually know that they are the right person for these decisions or they are competent or things like that? It's usually not the case. It's usually that we have a hierarchy. Our entire culture, like every culture, is based on this hierarchy, and it's all they have to have is the right title. That's it. But when it comes to making impact, that's a more interesting question, because it's more difficult than that. So a software engineer might have a lot of impact. I argue that the thing that gives you the most amount of impact is pure talent. But that's only half of the story, as I said. Your impact on the code and how well a system works and how well a team does, so forth and so forth. Well, we're coming to a border crossing now, because there's only things that there are two things that you can do to have an impact, basically, in my opinion. You can do code related things that have a fairly large impact, being really, really talented, very smart and so forth. In technology makes that difference. But then there is this other part, which I've always told you guys, there's two parts to it. You always have the tech skills and the social skills. And if you want to say, for example, as I was talking about, make a team very efficient, well, you can write a really, really good working code base or very efficient software that always works, for example. But that doesn't help so much if you have, say, incompetent coworkers, or you have people who don't really know how to work efficiently or things like that. That's the social part. It's sort of like well, let's take an analogy to the army or to the military. If you have the best guns in the world but nobody knows how to use them, you're still going to lose that war. It's that simple. And so the human factor, as security people will tell you, is always a factor. Like, it doesn't matter how great your security setup profile is, because if I can get the human to do what I want, or social engineering, things like that, I can still exploit your system, or I can get in. And the same thing is true for your impact. So it's not so much that you can't, like, your title matters all that much, because when you get to a certain level, your total impact is questionable, I would say. I would go as far as to say that nothing above, unless, as I said, we're getting to the levels where, you know, we're talking like you lead the entire company. It depends on how you define impact. But I will say that the people who makes the people who does that has the greatest impact on any software company are the tech lead level, or at the most, like, you know, there's these principal engineers types of things. Like, nothing over that makes much of a difference. Architects and like all of this sort of stuff, like when at the end of the day, it has very little to do with your title at that point. It has to do with that you have the most important thing, the talent, the raw talent, because that is the thing that gives you the greatest impact. It's not just about tech here, it's about, you know, actually being able to execute on things in a social arena and make people believe in your vision, create work frameworks, create policies, create whatever, right? And writing software might be a part of that. But once you get to because you can only, even if you are the best software engineer in the world, you won't be heard out usually, or you won't be able to make certain decisions or make certain policies go through if it's not your role to do so. So the other part is that you have a title that is high enough that you can actually make those changes, if that makes sense. So as I was saying, an example would be, if you just get to a tech lead level, you will have potentially a greater impact on your team and the way that your overall team works than if you were just a software developer. But the difference between that and you being an architect or something higher than that is actually very up for debate, because I argue it's the sweet spot level. This is where you have direct access to this code. You have you're sort of required to know a lot about the system, but if you want to have a true impact, and you also have the authority or the responsibility to make certain decisions that makes a difference over more than one person. And that is actually very important, because, as I said, if you're just a software engineer, you could be the best coder in the world, but in many problems, in order to make a real impact, you need to have more than one person helping out. You might need more resources. You might need to have people sort of comply with the work framework that you created or something like that. And that's very difficult if nobody's, you know, they don't really have to listen to you, because, as I said, a lot of people will, in many cases, just look upon whatever you're saying as great suggestions or so forth. But in some cases, you actually need authority to make people sort of comply with what you want to happen in order to make that impact. So what I want you to take away from this is that I wouldn't say that it's not about having a higher title that gives you a higher impact as a software engineer. It has to do primarily with talent. Titles, sure, as I said, to a point, because once you get to a level where you have a authority of related to how do people actually structure their work, that's when you can go full circuit, because you don't need power over like an entire company of people or an entire, like, you know, these really high-end jobs. Usually the policies that they set up there actually has very little impact in the grand scheme of things. I always tell people that if you want results, don't talk to the CEO or CTO or whoever. Talk to the person who's going to do the job. These are the people you should be talking to. Their higher management, or like people who are architects and so forth, they have a role, they have absolutely some type of impact. But at the end of the day, like making all the plans in the world, as I was saying, having all the guns in the world, the best strategy or so forth, is meaningless if your soldiers don't show up to work, or if you're like they don't know what to do. It is completely irrelevant, all the other stuff, without them. It's a symbiotic relationship. So at the end of the day, if you only have to pick one, you should always prioritize the people who will actually do the micro. Those people are more important basically every single time when it comes to execution and actually what's going to happen and so forth. Because usually these larger organizations, they go to and not just large organization. Basically any company can get to this point where you have a lot of people who do a lot of talking, a lot of planning, a lot of everything, but at the end of the day, all their planning is pointless if the execution is poor. And so if you want to have a true impact, you should find that sweet spot level where you're not so high up that you're detached from the actual work, but not so low level that you can never make a decision or create a solution that requires other people to follow along, because you're very limited. You have a lot, you can still do a lot in that space if you have the right talents for it, and if you're a good salesperson or so forth, and you like can make people lobby for your ideas. But at some point you're going to find that some things, like making a decision that is this is how we do work type of deals, right, is only possible if people expect you to have that authority, because some people are, well, we are still in many areas of society very tribal. So if you have the title manager something something, and people present, or you presented to your new group of whoever who's going to work for you that you're the boss, cool, everybody knows what that means. That means that if you say something, that's probably the way that we default to, and so forth, which gives you more leverage over certain decisions that might have been basically impossible if everybody perceived you as being someone who's just, this is this random man or woman who's talking about we should do that, but I don't really have to listen to them, so I'm not gonna, because of reasons, right? So that's my argument. Higher title doesn't really matter so much. It's all about finding the perfect level in order to have the maximum amount of impact. And my argument is that almost always that's going to be the staff level, or like the team lead level or something like that, where you have both the technical understanding and the talent to do all the coding and so forth and create really good frameworks or new solutions, and you have the role or authority to actually make things happen at the team level or multi-team level. That's the perfect spot to make the greatest impact, in my opinion. Have a great day.